resources that the Department of Education in the Philippines is producing are just what you said. They are supplements. So they are not going to be replacing teachers. What they are going to be doing is giving teachers a concrete way to deliver instruction remotely. And then teachers are still going to be responsible for doing a lot of teaching with what Aaron talked about today, creating lesson plans around those. So how do you engage and interact with the students before, activating prior knowledge, scaffolding them and being able to access the content? What activities and assignments, how do you engage with them while they are listening to the broadcast, while they are watching the TV module? And then what follow-up do you have afterwards? So while what is being created is going to be a really important way for teachers to be able to deliver instruction remotely, and oftentimes students will probably be accessing multiple ways depending on what you have access to. Again, I just want to emphasize that it's not going to replace teachers in any way. Your role, your teacher presence, and your interaction is going to be more important now than ever. So back to you, Crystal.
Well, thank you, Andrea. We have a lot of questions about e- asking about examples of broadcasts. How long will they be? What contents will they cover? And again, we need to defer those questions to the education department. And I suggest that post them on Facebook. And I'm sure that there will be a way to answer them. But somebody's asking about the expenses for the broadcast. Will the school have to cover the expenses? I'm sure that anonymous attendee is an administrator, um, even though this is a teacher session. But it is my understanding, and Aaron and Andrea chime in. It's my understanding that those broadcasts are provided already made and canned to you and to users. um, I don't think that we want to give the impression to you that you are expected to make radio or TV broadcasts yourself. Even though um, with my own online students, I do a lot of recordings and videos and so forth to supplement my lessons, but it's not TV based instruction or radio based instructions, even though I use podcasts. But it is my understanding that all this will be provided to you for your use. I just don't know when you will receive what and how you know what will be covered on certain days. So take those questions to Facebook. So I completely understand that all of you asking these practical questions. As a teacher, that would be the first thing on my mind too, honestly. um, Take them to Facebook. Don't forget to ask the questions and make sure that everybody is clear on how this is going to happen. Okay, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. So Vivian is asking here, how can we give formative and summative assessment to the learners? Um, so again, in terms of actually sending out those formative and summative assessments and then giving feedback on them, right, you'll need to determine what platform will work for you. But I think we covered some ideas for actual instruments or activities that you could use for formative and summative assessment. Exit slips, right? Formative assessment. So, setting up a Google form with a few questions after each broadcast. Or it could be paper-based as well, as I mentioned. So that's an example of a formative assessment. And summative assessment, the portfolios, right? In particular, if you're not seeing your students on a regular basis and providing frequent feedback is an issue, portfolios could be a great summative assessment, and having them collect their work and categorize it by objective, and curate the work that shows that they have achieved, each of the objectives in your course. And then you'll collect those portfolios at certain points throughout the course. This can be a way to carry out summative assessment. And as I mentioned, there's usually reflection journals are part of that process. And usually students have to also tell you why they think their work shows that they met certain objectives in your course. So that could be a type of summative assessment you could use in these sort of remote teaching situations that might work for you. Back to you, Andrea.
Yeah, so I saw a question, and I actually saw a few questions that were related to this, thinking about suggested practices to make sure that students are doing the work themselves, which is definitely a challenge that teachers all over the world right now are thinking about when we're used to having students in the classroom, being able to watch them do work, being able to watch them take tests. What happens when that is out of our control? So I think there are a couple things, practical suggestions I have. One of the big ones is just keep reminding students that this is not going to last forever. They will be back in school and they will be expected to be producing in person the work that they are producing remotely. So there will be accountability, and tests are not going to stop. So students will still be taking, the same tests. They might be delayed, but those tests will happen. So really, if they are not doing the work themselves, the people that they are going to be harming are themselves and their family, because that accountability isn't going to end. And then some other suggestions that I have are, as much as possible when you are coming up with the lesson plans, encouraging students to make it personal. How can you be, Aaron was doing examples of modals. So how can you have students write a script about an interaction that they've had where they're using modals, or a time in their life where they're using modals? But finding ways where you're encouraging students to make it personal, use their own words, draw on their own experiences, that really encourages students to be doing the work themselves in their own voice. And then some other things, having students, if they're creating materials, actually writing things out in their own hands. If you do have access to ways that students can do recordings of themselves, saying work, practicing the language out loud, those can be really ways to have some of that built-in accountability, because they know it's going to be viewed and watched. So those are some of my suggestions. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Crystal.
Thank you, Andrea. So there are questions about accessibility and differentiating learner needs. So with TV and radio, I think the biggest one that we need to be concerned with is students with hearing problems or visual problems. And I hope that that the producers of these segments will be providing CCTV and so forth, that there will be accessibility tools available. As far as students that are dyslexic or on the autism spectrum and so forth, I hope that to some degree you know your students and you know from your school or previous teachers what the students' needs are if you have new ones in your classroom now, or that you have some written notes on what their needs are. And I would go back to using the same skills that you have been using for face-to-face lessons to accommodate those students, to provide accommodations, to provide accessibility tools. Depending on the modality, it may be harder, if a student is dyslexic, you may want to use a different font when you write to them, because writing can be a medium that you communicate mostly in, and so forth, to help them out. But it really is not different from what you usually do as a teacher. You just need to apply the same principles to the modality that you choose to instruct with, or the modalities. And And then sometimes there may be limitations with students that have certain organic issues that cannot do certain skills. Use the same skills that you usually have for accommodations. You know, it's the best you can do. You're the teachers. You have the training. You know your kids. Back to Aaron.
Thank you, Crystal. So I wanted to answer a couple questions here. They're just quick ones. So Michael asks if I could share rubrics to assess the portfolios, and rubrics are a really important part of this. In fact, I don't know if I've mentioned yet. I don't think I have. It's actually on my last slide. Over the next few days, I'm going to be sharing in our Facebook group a series of supplementary resources that you can use to investigate some of these topics further. But there'll also be a lot of practical things, concrete things like rubrics that you can use for portfolios, and some more concrete ideas for activities before, during, and after your lesson. So I'll be sharing those over the next few days. So look out for those, Michael. Hema also asks here, are there any recommended resources or websites where we can learn more about TV-based instruction? And this is a similar question, but I would just respond here that there really aren't a lot, there hasn't been a lot written about TV-based instruction. And, you know, there have been some examples in other countries, but, you know, we're sort of, you know, you all are sort of writing the book on this right now. This is a huge experiment in remote instruction, whether it's through radio or through TV or online. And, you know, you guys are going to be the ones talking about this and the experts on this in the future. They're really, this is just a massive experiment. And, you know, there's really not a lot out there about how you do, you know, TV-based instruction on a massive scale across an entire country. So, you know, I thought of some ideas today, but there's not a whole lot. So sharing some additional resources this week and be helpful to you. Back to Andrea.
All right, so I just want to lift up, there was a question from Dari. Will it be fine to let parents also listen into the TV broadcast and let them comment as well? And I've been seeing this come up throughout our whole everything today during the chat, and I just want to emphasize that absolutely get parents involved. The more you can get parents involved, the better. And we are going to be talking about that quite a bit in the 6th webinar, where we're going to be talking about keeping students engaged and motivated, how crucial the parental involvement is going to be. Parental involvement can really be key in that accountability, even if parents don't necessarily have you know, grasp all of the language that is used. They can be helping to make sure that the students are doing the work or spending the allotted amount of time on the work, that they are not spending time copying off each other or reaching out to their friends. You know, parents can really kind of be the eyes of the teachers, and parents are just going to be, I think, for teachers, the #1 ally. And again, we'll talk about this more, but emphasizing that parents don't need to understand everything to be able to be really effective at helping keep students accountable, and helping to be able to give teachers feedback on things that their children might be talking about that they find to be confusing, or if they don't understand things. So make sure that, yes, you are reaching out to parents. You know, they are going to be incredibly important right now. All right, and back to you, Crystal.
Thank you. Somebody asked a really good question and said, TV-based instruction is a one-way instruction. And how can they acquire all the necessary skills by only having a one-way way of receiving information? So I don't think that anybody of us is suggesting that your main focus or main delivery of content should be by TV. Okay, this is one way of delivering some content, but you always need to keep in mind how many time kids should be in front of a TV at any age, how much time their attention span is, how long their attention span is at a certain age. And particularly when it comes to English learners have a burn out a lot faster than watching TV in their own language, because after a short time it all becomes background noise and they cannot comprehend that much anymore. So by no means anybody is suggesting that this would be the main vehicle for your content. In fact, it should be one part of your lessons. Going back to what we said before, very carefully craft your lesson modalities around your region and have a lesson that consists of different activities, different assessments, preferably formative ones, so you have evidence of learning. Every good lesson should have student-student interaction, group work, student-teacher interaction, whole class action. So try to create all these situations in the way you deliver your lessons. In some ways, you can set up pathways for students to create groups with other students in class. I've seen that with my daughter too, who set up group members in her school, groups with with friends at her school, where they used whatever they could to use to do their group work in. You know, mostly it was the social media, and kids are very innovative in doing that. But when kids do that and they step out of the classroom that you can actually observe, there's no accountability for you to see what they actually did and how much work they did and what the results are. So you should be very purposeful in setting up channels and places where you can actually see what they're doing, you know, so you can actually monitor the work. But please don't look at TV or radio as the one and only delivery of content. Back to Aaron.
Thank you, Crystal. So I'm seeing a lot of questions. In fact, some of the ones that have risen to the top as the most liked questions related to the length of lessons and the length of TV broadcasts and so forth. And again, these are questions which are hard for us to answer at this point. I think that the administrators in your schools and perhaps later in the webinar series, the Department of Education will be able to answer for you. We don't have that information at this point. And there were also some questions kind of going back to what Crystal said earlier about one teacher in particular said that she doesn't have any video editing skills, and how can she do this without video editing skills? I just want to reiterate that the teachers will not be producing these TV broadcasts, right? Only using them in their classes. Department of Education will be producing these broadcasts and scripting them and so forth. A teacher will just need to build lessons around them, right? That will be your role in the process. So don't worry about your lack of video editing skills. I'm also not good at editing videos, so I'll send it back to Andrea.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. So I saw there was a question about what are the, again, I mean, I'll keep talking about parents, but what are going to be the roles of parents? And, when students are on TV, there's the danger of other channels being distracting and not wanting to watch the educational channels. So bringing it back to, this is where the parents are going to be your ally, and making sure you're doing really clear communication with parents of what the channel is that their children are going to be asked to watch, what time the program is going to be on and the length of time it's going to be on, and then communicating with them very clearly about what are the expectations for what the student will be doing around that broadcast lesson. So that is going to be communicating very clearly those expectations for students to their parents are going to help enlist parents in keeping students accountable and making sure that they are watching and doing what they are supposed to do. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Crystal.
Yeah, I just had a question I wanted to answer and it disappeared. It moves so fast. Oh yeah, so a teacher asked, anonymous, I always get anonymous, would it be okay instead of using the pre-recorded sessions to ask students to watch YouTube videos? I use YouTube videos in my lessons every single day. I use it for flipped instruction. And in fact, I also ask my students to find good YouTube videos on certain topics because they come up with really good stuff. Of course, I mean, you need to use whatever works best for your lesson. And YouTube videos are excellent tools for flipped learning to outsource lower Bloom's taxonomy activities to the outside of class time and use the inside of class time for higher level application synthesis and production of products. So go ahead, use your YouTube videos. It's whatever resources and supplementary materials you can find, and YouTube has something on everything, as you all know. So have at it. Back to Aaron.
Thank you, Crystal. I wanted to answer one question here. It's a quick question and then amplify, actually, it's not a question, a kind of a comment here, but I thought it was really interesting. So an anonymous attendee says that he asks whether we're using TV-based instruction in the US. And I would answer that locally, I know that some cities do some English instruction, community-based instruction via TV. And I know in New York in particular, where I used to live, they have a TV series that is specifically for English language learners. But nothing of this sort of scale and formal type of education where, you know, this is sort of replacing the face-to-face experiences. Not that I know of here. You know, anything like this that the Philippines is undertaking. And then Erwin says that he wanted to share that in his elementary school district, every week they publish a 5-minute sort of walkthrough video and preview of the self-learning modules. So, you know, as students work through those, students and parents work through those self-learning modules, you know, his district actually publishes or creates and publishes a 5-minute sort of preview video of each of those self-learning modules. So I thought that was really interesting, and that could be a great tool for also previewing the broadcasts, right? So if you know the topic, you're familiar with the transcript for an upcoming broadcast, you know, record a short video previewing it, include some maybe questions for students to think about as they're watching the broadcast. You know, and if that's a possibility for you, you know, if you have the right bandwidth and your students have access to computers, that would be great. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Erwin. I'll pass it back to Andrea.
Great, thank you, Aaron. And I wanted to actually bounce off what Crystal and Aaron just talked about. Well, Aaron was talking about the 5-minute videos that were being shared. So if your school is doing something like that, if you've come up with a system, if you've come up with resources that are working, I really want to encourage you to share those on the Facebook page. And the way the Facebook page is set up will be each of the specialists will be doing different posts, and you can share in the comments. And some of the posts that we'll be putting up are encouraging people to share your ideas, share what you're doing, share resources. And that is such a good place to share resources. As teachers know, we're all educators. It is exhausting, and materials creation is really a lot of work. So when we can use resources that other teachers have created, when we're able to move in collaboration work together, take ideas, share ideas, that's when teachers are kind of at their best. So I just want to remind people that we have that Facebook page. There'll be prompts, there'll be comments. Please share links, share your ideas. If you're able to share videos or resources, that's a great place. And then also, don't hesitate to reach out and connect with each other. If somebody has a really good idea, you want to ask more. You might not be able to do that on the Facebook page, but don't hesitate to send them a message. So we're providing these modules for you, but we're also providing a space for you to be able to learn from each other. And so I really want to encourage people to take advantage of that. And then Crystal was talking about the use of YouTube videos and using those to supplement. And I think those are so fantastic. And we've had some really exciting luck with having students find videos and share videos based around a certain topic or that have certain examples of language. That can be a really good way to get students involved. Obviously, you're working with children, make sure it's run by the teacher first, but you can absolutely tap into the students' knowledge and the students' media experience to do that. Also, I am not a video editor, but I've been learning, and one of my favorite free platforms is something called Screencast-O-Matic, where you can make very simple videos and you can be sharing your screen, sharing a PowerPoint. And the free version, you can do up to 15-minute free videos. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there, and you don't have to have a high production value. It can just be opening a Zoom meeting and filming yourself and sending that out for it to be really important and really helpful for students. All right, I'm going to hand it over to you, Crystal.
Yeah, so I see a lot of questions about parents and families. And that topic is a really big one because our parents can range from highly educated professional parents that go out to work each day to parents that are illiterate, have never been to school, and for all intents and purposes have no study skills. They don't know how to school or how to use school because they have never done it. And that's a wide range, you know which families you talk about. Um, I think the key to working with families, and this is what I see here in the US in schools currently, is preparing parents for the schooling at home, whichever modality it is. Like here in the US, they make sure to prepare parents. Some of the teachers go to the homes and talk across a few meters to the families and share with them how they can help their kids. Many families don't even think about issues like a kid needs to have a workspace, because usually they think of the kids learning at school, right? Or the kid cannot learn when there's a lot of background noise and a lot of voices going around. How could they think about that? Maybe the kids need even resources and they're very poor and they cannot provide that. Can the school provide anything? Can you get donations for these families from a church or something? Here in America, we get a lot of donations. We get donations for hotspots of internet. We get donations for laptops or tablets. We get donations for food that's handed out each day because kids are not eating at school anymore right now. And many kids cannot get in any meals if they're not at school. So our community has volunteers and money collected to give out the meals to kids by driving the school buses or vehicles, private vehicles, to the homes and drive by their homes and hand out those meals and resources they need. Of course, we are a country of ample resources and people are able to donate those things, but I don't know if your churches maybe, but how can we get the parents to work with us? In some way, the parents need to be told how they can help. They need to have that information. It needs to be communicated. And if the parents are able to do this, there could even be a parent-family contract and even a contract with the kids about the do's and don'ts of learning when you're not learning at school. But the key is communication and planning, that kids have everything they need, to be able to participate in whatever you're offering to them. Because if they don't get any support at home, if they don't have a workspace, if they don't have resources, if they don't have food, they are not meeting the essential needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that's the number one the distraction to learning if you don't have the basic needs met, as you all know. So I'm giving this back to Aaron.
Thank you, Crystal. So Zaza asks about the TV broadcast being live, right? And the fact that as a result, students can't view it again. And as they would with online materials or online videos on YouTube, for example, where they can play it as many times as they want. This is definitely an issue, right? As I mentioned at one point during the webinar, when I was talking about taking notes, they move fast, right? And students can't stop them due just to the medium. So we need to think about that when we're creating those assignments, in particular when we're having students do certain activities or tasks during the broadcast. We need to take that into account. So as I mentioned, having them take notes, for example, might be hard for them. It might not be reasonable to expect that because it does move pretty quickly. So, how can you provide alternatives? Again, maybe having them take pictures of certain parts of the video that they found particularly interesting or that they were confused about, so they can sort of capture that moment. You as a teacher, if you have access to the right equipment, you might be able to record them. Even just recording with your cell phone, if that's a possibility for you. You could be a sort of crude recording, but it's still a recording, right? And it's something that you could share with your students, and they could replay it. That's definitely something that's important, an important consideration, right? The fact that it is live and that they won't be able to play it again. So, think about ways that you can perhaps record it, and if that's not a possibility, then think about the sorts of activities you give them while they're watching, right? And take that into consideration, that they might not be able to take notes or do exercises during the broadcast. So I'll pass it back to Andrea.
All right, and I am keeping an eye on the time, and it looks like we have 10 minutes left, which means we should be wrapping up our section to hand it over back to our partners at the Department of Education to be able to do the synthesis. So Aaron and Crystal, was there any last thoughts you wanted to wrap up with before we hand it back over?
I would like to wrap up with something. So thinking about particularly illiterate families or families that lack any significant form of education, we can also look at this COVID time as an incredible opportunity where parents can partake with their children in learning and maybe learn some skills that they wouldn't have learned otherwise if the kids were at school. So maybe we want to encourage parents of these backgrounds, to sit down with their kids and learn along with them, or watch the videos, listen to the broadcast, and see what their kids are doing with it. We're doing that here a lot with our international refugees that come from areas where parents don't have formal education, and they greatly benefit from the school students' education and learning along with them. So just wanted to throw that out as an opportunity.
Thank you, Crystal. I did want to mention something else before we end. Den, can I share my screen really quickly again?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. So I had a couple of slides here that I didn't get to. Okay, so a really important part of these webinars, each of these webinars, are the follow-up activities that we're doing in the Facebook group. So as I mentioned earlier, I'll be sharing some supplementary readings and resources in the coming days related to this webinar. And I hope you'll find those useful. There'll be some concrete things like rubrics and so forth. And then also starting tomorrow, I'm going to post a series of tasks related to the content of this webinar, TV-based instruction, that I'd like you to complete. And I'll have specific instructions in the post in the Facebook group. So there are a total of 3 tasks that I'll be posting. The first tomorrow. And the idea here is just to kind of get you to think about the ideas that we talked about today, that we discussed today, in a more sort of concrete way, and to think about how you're going to make these ideas, some of these ideas, work in your particular context, which, as we've said multiple times now, is unique, right? And you need to figure out how you're going to make this work for your students in your context. So these activities will encourage you to think about that. So look out for those in the Facebook group. And then the final thing is next week, 28th of September, will be the next webinar, and I will also be facilitating that. So I'll see you then. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the question and answer section, and we are going to hand it back over to our partners at DepEd to go ahead and provide the synthesis and the final tasks and reminders as we wrap up this webinar. So I just also want to take a minute while we are getting started, or while we are waiting to wrap up, to just say again a huge thank you to everybody for taking the time to participate, for all of your fantastic participation. The chat was just on fire. It was so much fun watching all of the different ideas rolling by, for your participation and your idea sharing on Facebook. And for showing up first thing in the morning and being ready and willing and excited to learn. We just want to emphasize how much we appreciate that and what a pleasure it is to be able to learn from you as well. All right, Sir Den, would you like to up?
All right.
Wonderful,
Yeah,
I see you taking
here.
it back.
So I got disconnected, sorry.
Oh, no problem.
All right. So thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, Aaron, for providing clear, comprehensive, and informative discussion on TV-based instructions, teaching and learning principles. Acknowledgement also goes to Andrea and Crystal for assisting Aaron and facilitating the Q&A session. I'm sure our teacher participants have not just learned so much, but also enjoyed today's webinar sessions as observed in their responses and questions in the Zoom chat box. Now let us listen to the synthesis of the webinar session to be delivered by my colleague, Ms. Ana Marlene Vilitonwa, Senior Education Program Specialist of the Teaching and Learning Division, Bureau of Learning Delivery. Ms. Ana?
Good morning. Is my audio clear?
Very
Yes.
clear.
All
Very
right.
clear.
So once again, thank you, Sir Aaron Royer, for that excellent discussion. Again, we were reminded that having a clear communication mechanism where teacher-student interaction can take place is indeed a critical element in remote teaching. So I think the interaction, this has been the concern of all teachers. Initially, they thought it's going to be linear, it's going to be one way, but actually we see a lot of dynamics, a lot of possibilities that we can do, just like what you've said about priming, authentic materials, adopting backward design, a clear end in mind is achieved. And so we also have to add the element of parents' accountability. Also, from the very start of this webinar, we've seen how active listening is required for a successful radio-based instruction. Likewise, TV-based instruction can also promote active learning. We've learned concrete strategies that are doable and manageable. It only shows that even though we are not physically present in front of our learners, we can make our students think and do some activities. which is a wonderful news for all of us. I think we should change that mindset that interaction is impossible in remote teaching situation, when in fact it's a matter of using the available existing resources that we have, and it depends on how we craft our lesson. Overall, we see the clear stages of lesson development, and perhaps this may not be new to all of us, but this is a good reminder. When we strategically put all the elements in the right place, we see a very engaging and teaching and learning process. And again, to our speaker, thank you for that excellent presentation. And now it's up to us on how we are going to practice it and put it into action and make our students produce the language. And so, if we have 3 P's in building our lesson from presentation, practice to production, I'd like to add to that, maybe for us, for teachers, we should have another 3 P's, like planning. We do a lot of planning with our colleagues, pedagogy, a solid knowledge on pedagogy, and partnership. You see, the parent-teacher relationship should be intensified, that we make our students feel that we are there for them, we understand their situation, and we truly care about their learning. So once again, thank you so much for that presentation, and have a blessed day, everyone.